Hello, everyone. This is Joe Boston with the Dallas Real Estate Investment Group and the Real Estate for Life podcast. I'm here today to talk to you about the mistakes people make when they're actually looking at doing the BRRRR strategy. And I actually have a slide that illustrates what the BRRRR is. So if you're not familiar with that concept, it is an absolutely wonderful concept and exit strategy for those of you that want to have long-term cash flow. But what I feel is that in different markets, if you're not doing the right calculations or taking into consideration all the expenses, then you can, just like any other strategy, not make as much money or be upside down. So let's talk a little bit about what the BRRRR strategy is. So what it stands for is buy, which means acquiring, rehabbing, which means renovating, renting, which means dealing with tenants, and all of the processes of tenancy, then refinancing. And then I added another one as throughout all those processes is marketing. Okay. So, and there's different types of marketing that you'll need to really get good at or hire out. So you have to have all of these working in synchronous so that this process works for you. Okay, so let's start with the buy. Okay, so that's the first letter of the BRRRR. So if you buy the property wrong, and what does that mean? So typically when we're looking at buying a property for investment and holding it, it boils down to what your payment is. Okay, so let's just cut to the chase. You need to be able to calculate what your payment, which is your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, will be if you're going to hold it, and then analyze if you can obviously receive more in return if you do rent it out. So for a really quick example, if you purchase a property for $100,000, your payment's $1,000, then you need to analyze that neighborhood to make sure that you could at least, I would say at least, generate $1,500 in rental income because of all of the expenses that go along with a rental. And that's kind of where I'm going with this is if you don't know how to calculate your expenses and then calculate what your payment's going to be, then you really need to do more research on how this process works. So the first bullet I have is using rehab calculator for net numbers. So instead of gross numbers, what a lot of people do is they don't take into consideration the expenses from their gross return on investment. So let's say I threw out a number which was $1,500 in rent. Well, typically, you should subtract, obviously, your reserve, which your reserve is for any unforeseen repairs that might occur. And then also, what you should do is have an additional amount if for fluctuations in property taxes, insurance, and those things do add up. So over time, those can offset what your gross is. And then vacancy. So if you're using a 1-year lease, well, obviously the tenant might not stay another year. So you might have a month or 2 months that it takes to get it occupied. So those numbers have to be put in place. So if I use the $1,500 number, most people will go, wow, you're making $500 a month positive cash flow. That's $6,000 a year. That's great. Well, that's not absolutely the net number because plumbing happens, plumbing issues occur. There'll be times where you'll have to go over there and make small repairs, or there could be a larger repair. And so that's kind of the downside with this strategy potentially in rental in general is that, there will be expenses incurred. So make sure you understand the calculator. We do have a customized calculator that you can actually purchase that actually takes all of the expenses into consideration, and you'll be able to run that out in future years. So the next thing is thinking your realtor has all the investment answers. So if you're using a realtor, which a lot of us, I'm a real estate broker, but a lot of people that don't have a license utilize a realtor. Well, a lot of realtors are not investors, right? So they'll give you the numbers, and then they'll gross everything up. So you'd find a realtor, one that understands how to work with real estate investors, and then also understands the numbers on how to calculate net numbers when it comes to the BRRRR strategy and rentals, if that's what your plan is. And then the next thing is having the correct loan and understanding it. So if you're purchasing a property with hard money, let's say, which is a short-term loan, and then your goal is to transition it into a permanent loan, understand the market, because right now in this high interest rate climate we're in, it might be tougher to transition it to a refinance or an owner finance or to another loan if you might not have the reserve or the money to do so. So make sure you have the correct loan in the beginning. Make sure you have done your research on if you should use an institutional lender. A lot of times you'll use a hard money loan just because that's all you know, and you can buy the property quickly. But in this environment where homeowners have low interest rates and they're not moving as fastly, you might have to hold the property longer. So understand that you need to know the correct loans. We actually do that at the Dallas Real Estate Investment Group. We cover, which our kickoff is the third Saturday of January. So it is our money month. We're going to start with money. So we will have all of our sponsors and, some of our really good relationship people that lend money at the meeting. And then we'll actually go over some of these loans in detail so you understand them, because a lot of times you're looking at the grossed up number and don't necessarily understand what that means. Next, we have a rehab. So the mistake that you can make is overdoing the rehab. So look at the neighborhood and understand that you just have to make sure it fits the form, fit, function of that neighborhood, and that you don't have to overdo it. In addition to that, have your general contractor lined up while you're looking. So a lot of people, try to find the house, then they scramble to find a general contractor. And unfortunately, at that time, then you're working out of a situation of desperation. I would actually start interviewing general contractors first. Why you want to do that is then you'll have a good idea of what needs to be done with that general contractor, how they operate, if you two get along, how the communication lines will work. You don't want to do that after the fact. You want to do that before. And there's nothing wrong with doing that, because general contractors will sit down with you. And, if you're a new person in the industry, you might find a connection where you can learn a lot from them. Now, I would say, continue to come to groups like ours so that you can learn how these processes work, what some of the costs are associated with doing rehabs. But I would start first with learning what a general contractor does, and then, interact with them to see if you can work with some, and then go forward with, looking for properties. Next is underestimating repairs. And this kind of ties back to the general contractor. But, like in boxing, they say it's the punch that you don't see that knocks you out. It's similar in real estate in that if you can't see what's in the walls a lot of times when you're doing a walkthrough. So the plumbing or underneath or electrical, you can see the roof, but you might not be able to see the decking. But there can be some things that you're not able to see that can come back to bite you. But you want to make sure that you are taking all the repairs into consideration, and you're estimating them appropriately. And in today's market cost, right? So you don't want to use, what you paid for flooring 5 years ago in today's terms. So make sure that you're looking at all those things and estimate them, and take your time to do it. And then not understanding comparables. This is huge when it comes to doing a rehab. So what I mean by that is one does not make a trend. So I would like to have 5 houses that are similar to the one that I have. If I can do that, right? It might be tough to get that many, but you want to get as many as possible, many like properties as possible. And what comparables means is houses that are similar to yours, that have sold, right? Or that are in the condition to be sold, so that you can get a great idea of when you purchase and do your rehab estimates, will that measure up to what you want to return, what you want to gain in return? So not understanding comparables. We actually do this too at some of our meetings, and then you can go, and there's a lot of resources online about comparables and how they work. But, like I always say, this is real estate, not feel estate. So believe your numbers, go with your numbers, make sure that if it does not work, if the numbers don't look like it's going to generate the return that you want, then don't move forward with it. Go to the next property. Okay. There's nothing wrong. Sometimes you can make money by saying no and save yourself a lot of headache. Okay. So now let's talk about rent. Okay. So, I grew up in an era where rentals were the way that real estate investors made money. And, rentals are a long-term play. And, for people that want to rent still, I do think that there's a opportunity for it, but you have to really know your numbers. Okay. Because rentals are not for short-term gain. A lot of people say it's for the cash flow, but really and truly, in my mind, I think rentals are for the appreciation. And I'm going to have another topic called Don't Sit on the Sidelines, because rentals, what they can do is they can allow for time to pass, for your property to appreciate, and then you realize that appreciation. True enough, they can generate cash flow, but overall, when you do have that reserve and some of those repairs that are being made, and a lot of times you can break even, and then over time, your appreciation might be 100,000. You might have bought a property for, let's say, 150,000. You keep it for 10 years and it's worth 300,000. Well, you've had vacancies during that time. You've had repairs you had to make. So when you actually do your analysis, you might have come out a little bit ahead or even broke even. But now you're sitting with, equity that really means something. So if you have, I call it the race to 10. If you have 10 of those, and you've made 100,000 on each one in appreciation, now you're sitting on $1 million in appreciation. So I think that's what the goal of rentals are. But in this scenario, what you're doing is you're using the next topic is refinance to generate a more favorable spread, right? So one of the mistakes you can make is not looking forward on your rental amount on what you can refinance that property for. So let's continue to talk about rentals, but analyzing the neighborhood and the types of tenants. So obviously, there's a correlation between low income, middle income, and high income. So you have to analyze the neighborhood and just gauge what type of tenants you're going to have, because there's different processes out there like Section 8. There are low income housing program that are out there. So you can use those. In addition to that, you might just use the MLS and to get a general tenant. But I would say this, which is the next topic, is look at the payments and the terms, right? So one of the things we used to do was do multi-year leases. I don't advise that anymore because the market fluctuates so much. And if you keep it static over, a 3-year period, but your property tax is double, you actually could be upside down on your rental. So make sure I just advocate doing 1-year leases now, which I used to do multi-year leases, but I've changed. And then use a software program, automate everything that you can so that you're not doing it manually. I think that makes being a landlord tougher is when you're doing things manually so that when you're getting your payments. If it's not, if your payments are not being received on time, it's automatically sending out notices. And then, learning the eviction process, but automate as much as possible. A lot of people don't do that. And I think that that's what makes, the rental game a lot harder. So the next thing is refinance. The problem I see with that is not calculating the refinance rate. So you can't just assume that when you get your initial loan, that when you go to refinance it a year later, or let's say 3 months later, right? Because when you're doing a BRRRR strategy, it's going to be sooner than that. But what if the interest rate is not advantageous like it is now? So what if it's, 7% interest rate and you got your, whatever initial loan you received is at 6%. So you can't just, automatically assume that your refinance rate is going to be great. Now, hopefully it will be. You might have to hold it as a rental longer, so that you can get that beneficial spread. So let me give you an example. So we talk about that you bought it for $100,000, which your payment's $1,000, but your interest rate is at, let's say, 6%. So you do your rehab, you're renting it out for $1,500, but obviously you want your $1,000 payment to go down. So when you refinance it, what you're looking at doing is a couple things. One is hopefully the property appreciated, and you can take cash out based on the appreciation amount or of how your property actually went up in value. Then also hopefully your payment will go down. But if those don't align, and just like right now, property values in the Dallas-Fort Worth area are going down somewhat. Interest rates are going down some, but I mean, they're still higher than I would like. But if those things don't match up, then you're kind of stuck with a rental, right? So not that that's bad, but then your refinance is put on hold until the market shifts. So understanding the terms of the timeline, right? So what the interest rates are, you're doing annual leases, so you might have to extend that annual lease. So that's important. And then upside down money didn't appraise, right? So that goes back to the comparables. So if you didn't do your comparables right, and it gets an appraisal in the future, right, when you're trying to refinance it, well, it doesn't add up. So now you cannot refinance and pull money out like you want to, or reduce it, by the amount that you want to, because it didn't appraise. So you have to take that into consideration. And that means the area, right? A lot of times the area, and also the market as well. And then not having access to money or the down payment, because when you refinance, you might have to put some skin in the game. So make sure you have the reserve or access to the reserve or the amount that you have to put down for your loan. So for example, you might go to an institutional bank, right? If you bought it with hard money, go to an institutional lender, and then they're going to say, well, we're not going to lend you 100%. So where are you going to get the down payment money? So we have access to that. We do have gap funds available, but you need to take that into consideration. So that's another thing I think people need to be aware of. And then finally, that's not part of the BRRRR, but it's the marketing, right? So start marketing day one. So the day you decide to buy the property, know what exit strategy is for that area. Okay. So you need to be able to pivot. And that's what's crucial in this market, especially when there's so much competition. You don't want to analyze all your numbers or at the highest rental rate, and then the market changes. So I see a lot of people that put their maximum rental income in there, and they send those numbers to the bank. And let's say it is $1,500, but then the market shift and there's houses that are around that property that are renting for 1,300 or 1,200. Well, now you're upside down. So make sure you use conservative numbers, but start marketing right away to start seeing what the feedback is. It's like we always say, the market's going to tell you if you're high or not. So then not posting on social media immediately. So let people know that it's coming soon. Let people know that it's available. You might have it already rented before you even start. If it's some people live in that neighborhood or have family members, so you want to start marketing that immediately. And then not networking, right? Because it's your next deal that you're working on as well. Once you get that occupied, then you move on to the next one, right? So I always say it's the rule of threes. You should be working on one. So one in, one you're working on, and one out, right? So that's pretty simple. But once you can get that process rolling, then you can see how you can generate wealth quickly. So hope that helps. I think there are some mistakes that can be made in the BRRRR process. You have to be analyzing all of the process step by step so that you're not stuck in one specific area to do this process. I do think it's a great way to get into the market. But you have to have the relationships with the banks, with the hard money lenders, with the gap funders, and then know how the rental process works. So hope this helps, and I can't wait to see you again. Our kickoff at the Dallas Real Estate Investment Group is on the 3rd Saturday of January, which is on the 20th of January. And we're going to have our sponsors and food, and we're going to have a keynote speaker. So it's just a great networking event. So again, that's at dallasreig.com. We would love for you to come and visit us there. And we will see you soon. Talk to you later.